So he knows that with Jacob will have to endure, okay? He'll do this. But then the question then is, does Rachel love Jacob? And the answer is yes, of course, right? Because once Jacob married Leah, then Rachel could have just said, screw this, I'm going to marry someone else. But she didn't. She had to wait 7 years. And you can imagine those 7 years were the longest 7 years for both Jacob and Rachel. In fact, every day Leah probably said to Rachel, ha 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 ha, okay? She was laughing at Rachel, just saying, you see, Jacob doesn't really love you. And Rachel had to endure, okay? So this is the power of love. The way that Jacob and Rachel were able to endure all this humiliation in order to just be together, okay? It's a beautiful love story. And this is the great thing about the Bible. The Bible, written by this person, okay, who's clearly a woman, right? Only a woman writes stories like this. It has both economy and irony. Economy just means that she's able to, with very few words, convey deep meaning. She's able to, in the story, just a couple paragraphs, create an entire universe. We can see actually the movie play out, okay? It's 14 years, where in the first 7 years, Jacob was really happy. But in the last 7 years, every day he's agonizing because he doesn't want to be with Leah, he wants to be with Rachel, but they can't be together, and he has to wait all these 7 years, okay? So economy, but also irony. Irony just means it's funny, guys, okay? I know that you're taught the Bible as a religious text, but when it was first conceived, it was meant to be a funny story, okay? This is a story of two sisters who hate each other and they're competing for the same guy, all right? And this competition continues. When Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, she envied her sister, and she said to Jacob, give me children or I shall die, okay? You have to get me pregnant because Leah is having a lot of kids. Jacob became very angry with Rachel and said, am I the place of God who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb? Then she said, here is my maid. Go into her that she may bear upon my knees and that I may have children through her. So she gave him her maid as a wife, and Jacob went to her, and Leah conceived and bore Jacob a son. Then Rachel said, God has judged me and she has heard my voice and given me a son, okay? This is a comedy where she's in competition with Leah. Leah has a lot of kids, so Rachel is going to cheat and give her maid to Jacob. And whenever a baby comes out, Rachel says, it's mine, it's mine. And she's going to go around and cheer to try to outcompete Leah, okay? This is a comedy. Then Jacob said, God has judged me and has heard my voice and given me a son. Rachel's maid conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Then Rachel said, with mighty wrestlings I have wrestled with my sister and have prevailed. So she named him Naphtali. Okay? All right? Okay, so does that make sense? And now what Leah's going to do is give her maid to Jacob as well in order to continue the competition. All right, to try to outcompete Rachel. Okay, so this is all just a comedy. Okay, it's meant to be beautiful stories that that provoke you into deep reflection. All right, and this is why the Jews are so creative. If you look at the media, if you look at Hollywood, if you look at academia, the Jews dominate, okay? Because from the moment they're born with these stories that force them to think deeply about who they are, what it means to be human, and what life is about. Okay? And as you can understand, you can just have multiple interpretations of what's going on. But they force you to think very deeply about life, to have an inner debate with yourself. Okay? All right. Okay. So now we go on to David, okay? The story of David, it's very, very complicated, okay? So in the Bible, what it tells us is that God needs a king for the nation of Israel. And he sends a prophet named Samuel to find a king, and he goes to the house of Jesse. And in the house of Jesse, he finds David, who's the youngest boy, and he says, you will in the future be the favored king of Israel, okay? And David, in his early age, does wonderful things. For example, he defeats Goliath, okay? So you've heard the story of David and Goliath, right? But after he kills Goliath, the king, Saul, becomes envious, jealous of David, and that forces David to run away. Eventually, Saul is killed, and David comes back and becomes king, okay? That's the story in the Bible. Guys, as you learned in this class, this is all propaganda, okay? What really happened is that Saul is king, David is the mercenary, and he's a very good and popular mercenary. He has a lot of soldiers who follow him, and therefore, he kills Saul and becomes king himself, okay? But now, what the Bible needs to do is legitimize David, okay? Try to tell us that, oh, no, David is not ambitious. He was not ruthless. God willed him to be king, okay? And that's why the Bible was written the way it was. So this is written by the court historian, okay? The person who wrote Genesis is a person we call the Yahwehs, okay? Because for her, the God is Yahweh, the Yahwehs, or J. This person is a court historian. So his job is to clean up the image of David, to tell the story of David again, but in a much more clean way that absolves him of any crimes. Okay? So, where we are on the story is that Saul is dead. But Saul's family is still around. And Saul's family has a general named Abner, okay? But after Saul is dead, Abner feels slighted by the family. So Abner's like, screw this, I'm going to go and support David. And David, of course, is very happy, okay? All right. Abner came with 20 men to David at Hebron. David made a feast for Abner and the men who were with him. Abner said to David, let me go and rally all Israel to you in order that you may take a covenant with me and you may reign over all that your heart desires, okay? So what Abner's saying is, make me your general and I will give you Israel. David dismissed Abner and went away in peace. Then the servants of David arrived with Joab from a raid. Okay, so Joab is David's general, bringing much spoil with them. But Abner was not with David at Hebron, for David had dismissed him, and he had gone away in peace. When Joab and all the army that was with him came, it was told Joab, Abner came to the king, and he has dismissed him, and has gone away in peace. Now, Joab and Abner have a conflict, because Abner killed one of Joab's brothers. So Joab wants to kill Abner, okay? What have you done? Abner came to you. Why did you dismiss him so that he got away? You know that Abner came to deceive you and to learn your comings and goings and to learn all that you are doing. Joab came out from David's presence. He sent messengers after Abner. They brought him back from the cistern of Sarah. But David did not know about this, okay? So Joab goes and kills Abner, okay? Now, so if you read this story, you think that David did nothing wrong, okay? But if you think about it, there are lots of problems with this story. The first problem is that Joab, the general, is rebelling against David, right? If you're David, who are you more afraid of? Are you afraid of Abner or are you afraid of Joab? You're afraid of Joab, right? Because Joab has your army. Okay? So there's no way that David would allow Joab to rebel against him. So the only conclusion is that Joab acted with the permission of David. So David knew about this, okay? All right, this is a lie. David knew about this. In fact, David probably ordered Joab to kill Abner. Then the question is why? Well, if you're a king, you're most concerned about loyalty, right? If Abner betrayed Saul's family, there's a possibility Abner will come and betray you as well, okay? So this guy needs to be eliminated because he's dangerous, okay? And it makes sense because remember, David betrayed Saul, so he's afraid that others will betray him as well. All right? So this story, even though it's a lie, it gives us enough clues to construct the truth for ourselves. And that's what makes the Bible different from other religious texts. Other religious texts are sayings or truisms, but these are stories. And stories are living things that we can reconstruct in our heads. Okay, and again, this helps us explain why the Jews are so creative people, because they grew up in a tradition of stories as opposed to truths or sayings. Okay, so they can constantly reimagine these stories from themselves. All right, so now we get to the most famous story of David. All right, So, in the spring of the year, when kings go out to battle, David sent Joab with his officers and all Israel with him. Okay? So what's really important to know is that even though Joab disobeyed David and killed Abner, Joab was never punished, okay? Which tells us that Joab was probably acting on the orders of David. They ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbi, but David remained at Jerusalem. Okay, so David's in Jerusalem while the army is fighting elsewhere. It happened late one afternoon when David rose from a couch and was walking about on the roof of the king's house that he saw from the roof a woman bathing. And the woman was very beautiful. David sent someone to inquire about her. It was reported, this is Bathsheba, okay? Daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite. So David sent messengers to get her, and she came to him, and he lay with her. Then she got pregnant, okay? Again, this is a very problematic story because, first of all, a woman doesn't sleep with you just because you ask her to, okay? And Bathsheba, remember, is married to Uriah the Hittite. Okay, so who is Uriah? Uriah is the best soldier in David's army. He's very popular with the men. So if you're David, who are you afraid of? You're afraid of Uriah. Okay, does that make sense? All right? Uriah is the person you're most afraid of. All right? So now he has a problem because Bathsheba is pregnant. And David's like, I need to fix the problem because if Uriah comes back and discovers that his wife got pregnant while he's away, he's going to know that I slept with her, okay? So he has to solve this problem. So David sent word to Joab, send me Uriah the Hittite. And Joab sent Uriah to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked how it's going. And David says to Uriah, okay, you know what? You're a great warrior. Why don't you go and see your wife? But then Uriah doesn't go see his wife because Uriah says to David, listen, your army is fighting for you. I cannot go sleep with my wife and feel good about myself while your men are dying. I refuse to be with my wife if the men are outside, okay? So now David has a huge problem. So what David does is he writes a letter to Joab and tells Joab, hey, go do this, okay?